In 1911, the United States government did something unprecedented. It broke apart the most powerful company in America. John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil controlled 90% of the country's oil refining. The courts ruled it was an illegal monopoly and ordered it split into 34 separate companies. Fast forward to today. A handful of tech companies control how billions of people communicate, shop, and access information. Google handles 90% of all internet searches. Meta owns the platforms where 3 billion people connect with friends and family. Amazon dominates online retail. And just like in 1911, the government is stepping in. Multiple antitrust cases are now underway against big tech. The question isn't whether history will repeat itself, it's whether it will rhyme. In the late 1800s, John D. Rockefeller didn't just dominate the oil industry, he practically was the oil industry. Standard Oil started in 1870, and Rockefeller built it through a combination of innovation and ruthless tactics. He negotiated secret deals with railroads to get cheaper shipping rates than his competitors. When that wasn't enough, he got the railroads to give him rebates on his competitors' shipments too. If a rival refused to sell to Standard Oil, Rockefeller would slash prices in that region below cost until the competitor went bankrupt. Then he'd buy their company for pennies on the dollar and raise prices again. By 1904, Standard Oil controlled 91% of oil production and 85% of final sales in the United States. The public noticed. Journalists, called muckrakers at the time, began investigating. Ida Tarbell, whose father had been driven out of business by Standard Oil, spent years researching the company. Her exposé, published in McClure's magazine, revealed the extent of Rockefeller's monopoly to the American public. In 1906, the federal government sued Standard Oil for violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. The case took 5 years, but in 1911, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously. Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly and had to be broken up. The company was split into 34 separate entities. You'd recognize some of them today: ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP America. Here's the irony. Several of those pieces eventually became larger than the original Standard Oil ever was. Standard Oil's breakup established a crucial precedent. In America, no company is too big to be held accountable. If Standard Oil's dominance lasted decades, AT&T's lasted a full century. In 1913, AT&T made a deal with the government. It would connect independent phone companies to its network and stop acquiring competitors. In exchange, it got to remain a legal monopoly. The government decided that telephone service was a natural monopoly. It made more sense to have one interconnected network than dozens of competing ones. For the next 70 years, AT&T, known as Ma Bell, was the only phone company most Americans ever knew. You didn't buy your phone, you rented it from AT&T. You couldn't choose your long-distance carrier. AT&T was the only option. The company even owned Bell Labs, the research division that invented the transistor, the laser, and the Unix operating system. But by the 1970s, new technologies were emerging. MCI wanted to compete in long-distance service. Computer companies wanted to connect devices to phone lines. AT&T fought them at every turn. In 1974, the Department of Justice sued AT&T for antitrust violations. The case dragged on for 8 years. Finally, in 1982, AT&T agreed to a consent decree. It would break itself into 8 pieces: 1 long-distance company, AT&T, and 7 regional, Baby Bells. The breakup was supposed to create competition, and for a while, it did. Long-distance prices dropped. New technologies flourished. The internet, which needed open phone lines to reach homes, might not have spread so quickly without the AT&T breakup. But here's the pattern. The Baby Bells eventually re-merged. Through a series of acquisitions over 30 years, they reconsolidated into just 3 companies: AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen. The monopoly broke apart, then slowly reassembled itself. Which brings us to 2025, where the government is once again taking on monopolies, this time in the tech industry. Let's start with Google. In August 2024, a federal judge ruled that Google illegally monopolized the search engine market. The company pays billions to Apple, Samsung, and Mozilla to make Google the default search engine on their devices, shutting out competitors like Bing and DuckDuckGo before users even have a choice. Then in April 2025, a second ruling found Google guilty of monopolizing digital advertising technology. The judge found that Google controls the tools publishers use to sell ads, the tools advertisers use to buy ads, and the marketplace where they meet, essentially owning both sides of the transaction and the exchange in between. The parallels to Standard Oil are striking. Like Rockefeller's railroad rebates, Google uses exclusive contracts to lock in distribution. Like Standard Oil's control of refining and transportation, Google controls every layer of the digital ad stack. The Department of Justice initially proposed breaking Google into separate companies, splitting off the Chrome browser and Android operating system. But in September 2025, the judge rejected that request, instead ordering Google to share search data with competitors and prohibiting exclusive default search agreements. Now let's look at Meta. The Federal Trade Commission sued in 2020, arguing that Facebook's acquisitions of Instagram in 2012 and WhatsApp in 2014 were part of a buy or bury strategy to eliminate competitors. Internal emails showed Mark Zuckerberg writing that Instagram was a threat that needed to be neutralized. The FTC wanted Meta broken up. Instagram and WhatsApp spun off as separate companies. But in November 2025, Meta won. The judge ruled that the company doesn't hold a monopoly now because it faces fierce competition from TikTok and YouTube. The social media landscape had changed so dramatically since the lawsuit was filed in 2020 that the FTC's case no longer held up. The FTC has appealed. Then there's Amazon. The FTC's case, filed in 2023, alleges that Amazon maintains monopoly power in online retail through anti-competitive practices. If sellers offer lower prices on other websites, Amazon allegedly punishes them by burying their products in search results. The company also requires sellers to use Amazon's expensive fulfillment service to qualify for Prime, making it harder to sell on competing platforms. Amazon's case is still in the early stages. The trial is set for 2027. But the allegations echo Standard Oil's predatory pricing and AT&T's tying arrangements. So what does history tell us? First, monopoly breakups happen when public pressure and government action align. Standard Oil fell after Ida Tarbell's exposés. AT&T broke up after years of complaints from competitors and consumers. Today's big tech cases come after growing concerns about privacy, misinformation, and market power. Second, the pattern repeats. Companies dominate through a mix of innovation and exclusionary tactics. Regulators eventually intervene, courts rule, companies break apart. But here's the third lesson, and it's the most important one. Broken monopolies often reconsolidate. The pieces of Standard Oil merged back into giants. The baby bells became AT&T and Verizon again. Meta beat its antitrust case. Google avoided a breakup. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it does rhyme. The players change, the technology changes, but the fundamental tension between innovation, competition, and consolidation, that's been the same for over a century. The question now is whether this time will be different, or whether 30 years from now, we'll be watching these same companies, possibly under new names, dominating the next generation of technology. History suggests we already know the answer.